My name is Rachel Morgan, and for almost 5 years I worked at a marketing agency in Chicago. When I first started, I was so excited. Fresh out of college, full of ideas, eager to prove myself. I thought this job would be the start of my dream career. But then, I met him. My boss. Let's call him Mr. Adams. On the surface, he looked professional. Tailored suits, expensive watch, charming smile. But behind that mask, he was toxic. He thrived on belittling people, especially women. He made sarcastic comments during meetings, shot down my ideas without even listening, and constantly reminded me how lucky I was to even have a job. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself, Rachel, toughen up. This is the real world. But as weeks turned into months, the abuse became harder to ignore. Whenever I stayed late working on projects, Mr. Adams never thanked me. Instead, he would nitpick every tiny detail. If something went wrong, even if it wasn't my fault, he blamed me in front of the entire team. I can't count how many times I cried in the bathroom stall, silently begging myself not to quit. But I couldn't quit. I needed the paycheck. I had student loans, rent to pay, and no family to fall back on. So, I endured. The breaking point came during one of our biggest client pitches. I had spent weeks preparing, late nights, endless research, creating a presentation I was truly proud of. On the day of the meeting, Mr. Adams stood in front of the clients, clicked through my slides, and presented my work as if it was his own. Not once did he mention my name. And the clients loved it. They praised him. They shook his hand. And I sat there, silent, my stomach twisting, while he smiled smugly across the table. That night, I went home, collapsed on my bed, and cried until I couldn't breathe. Something inside me broke. But then, something else sparked. I realized I couldn't let him keep stealing my work, crushing my confidence, and treating me like I was disposable. No. I was going to fight back. But my revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be calculated, quiet, perfect. And by the time I was done, Mr. Adams would regret underestimating Rachel Morgan. After that humiliating client pitch, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive at this job. I was going to make sure Mr. Adams paid for everything he had done. But revenge like this couldn't be rushed. I had to be patient. I had to be smart. The first step was information. I started paying closer attention to him. He was careless, arrogant. He loved cutting corners and leaving the dirty work to the rest of us. If a report was incomplete, he dumped it on my desk late at night with a smirk. Fix it before morning, Rachel. He billed the company for fancy client dinners that looked suspiciously like dates. He claimed credit for other people's ideas. And when things went wrong, he always had someone else to blame. The second step was documentation. I created a private folder on my home computer. Every rude email, every text he sent me after hours demanding free labor, I saved them all. Every time he stole one of my ideas, I wrote it down in a journal with the date and details. I even started quietly copying myself on important emails so I had proof of my contributions. At first, it felt sneaky. But then I reminded myself, he had been stealing from me for years. My time, my effort, my creativity. This wasn't sneaky. It was survival. The third step was allies. I wasn't the only one suffering under him. My coworker, Jenna, was always on the receiving end of his criticism too. One late evening, while we both stayed behind fixing his mistakes, I asked softly, "Has he ever taken credit for your work too?" The way her eyes widened told me everything. Soon, I discovered I wasn't alone. There were at least 4 of us, all women, all exhausted, all quietly enduring his abuse. We formed a little circle of trust. We started sharing our experiences, pooling evidence, and building a case without even saying it out loud. Still, I knew it wasn't time yet. Not until the plan was airtight. So I kept pretending. I smiled in meetings. I nodded whenever he bragged about his brilliant strategies. I acted like the loyal, hard-working employee he thought I was. Meanwhile, my folder of evidence grew thicker and thicker. Then came the annual performance reviews. I walked into his office, nervous but secretly hopeful. I had worked harder than anyone in that department. I thought, at the very least, he'd acknowledge it. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair, smirked and said, "Rachel, you're fine. But you need to learn to work harder. You should try to be more like me." I nearly laughed in his face. More like him. He barely worked at all. But I didn't laugh. I didn't argue. I just smiled, nodded, and thanked him for his feedback. Because in that exact moment, I knew something he didn't. His empire was built on lies, and I was the one holding the match. And very soon, I was going to light it. The moment I walked out of that performance review, something inside me clicked. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. It was time to start putting my plan into action. The first opportunity came sooner than I expected. We had a major campaign coming up for a luxury car brand, a client worth millions. It was the kind of account that could make or break reputations in our industry. Naturally, Mr. Adams wanted all the glory. He called a meeting and announced, "This campaign is going to be revolutionary, and I'll be leading it personally." Of course, leading it meant dumping all the work on us. He told me to draft the pitch deck. He ordered Jenna to run the market research. He had Michael, one of the few guys on the team he pretended to respect, handle logistics. But he didn't know that every single thing he assigned was going straight into my little web of evidence. Emails where he claimed, "I came up with this strategy." Screenshots showing my name as the original author of the presentation slides. Notes proving he'd barely lifted a finger. The more I collected, the more confident I became. But I still needed a trigger, something big enough to expose him publicly. And then, fate handed me a gift. 2 weeks before the client pitch, I overheard Mr. Adams on the phone in his office. He was bragging to someone, maybe a friend, maybe his girlfriend, about how he was going to wow the clients with his genius ideas. I leaned closer to the door. He said, "The presentation is basically done. Rachel's been working on it non-stop. I'll just add my name at the top, and it's a done deal." My blood boiled. He wasn't even pretending anymore. That night, instead of going home, I stayed late at the office. Everyone else had left. The building was quiet. I opened the pitch deck on my computer, the one I had spent weeks perfecting. And then I did something bold. I saved a second version. The original file, the one with all the polished research, graphics and strategies, I moved to my personal drive, safe and sound. The second version, the one Mr. Adams thought he was going to present, I stripped bare. I left only vague bullet points, half-finished graphs, and confusing statistics that didn't add up. To anyone looking at it, it seemed sloppy and rushed. And then, I waited. Sure enough, 2 days later, Mr. Adams swaggered into the office with a smug grin. He announced, "The deck is ready. Great job, team. The client's going to love it." None of us said a word. I watched him email the wrong version, the sabotaged version, straight to the clients. My heart pounded in my chest. This was risky. If it blew back on me, I'd be finished. But if it worked, oh, it would be glorious. And when the day of the pitch arrived, I knew it was all worth it. We gathered in the conference room. The clients joined over video call. Mr. Adams strutted to the front of the room, radiating fake confidence. He clicked to the first slide. Silence. Confused frowns spread across the clients' faces. Slide after slide, their confusion deepened. The data was incomplete. The strategy was incoherent. The graphs were wrong. One of the clients finally interrupted. "Mr. Adams, this presentation doesn't make sense. Did you even prepare for this?" The color drained from his face. I sat there, calm, hiding my smile behind my notebook. He stammered, scrambled, tried to improvise. But the damage was done. The clients were unimpressed, irritated even. By the end of the call, they said they'd reconsider the partnership, which was basically corporate code for, "We're done here." When the meeting ended, Mr. Adams was furious. He turned on us, barking accusations. Who messed with the deck? Who screwed this up? But here's the thing, he couldn't prove anything. He had locked us all out of the file. Only he had access. Only he had sent it. And everyone in that room knew it. That was the day his shiny armor cracked. For the first time, people stopped seeing him as untouchable. Doubt had entered the room. And I had just taken my first real step toward revenge. After the disastrous car brand pitch, the office was buzzing. People whispered in hallways. For once, the blame wasn't pointed at me or Jenna or anyone else. It was squarely on Mr. Adams. But he wasn't about to admit defeat. Oh no. His ego wouldn't allow it. He stormed around the office for days, snapping at everyone, demanding impossible deadlines, desperate to reassert control. But the harder he pushed, the more mistakes he made. And I was there, quietly, patiently, recording everything. Every late-night email where he contradicted himself. Every project where he took credit but failed to deliver. Every instance of him billing the company for business dinners that were clearly personal. My folder of evidence was becoming a weapon. But a weapon is useless without the right moment to strike. That moment came in the form of an internal audit. The company announced they would be reviewing expenses and client accounts. It was standard procedure, something that happened every couple of years. But this time, it felt like fate handing me a golden ticket. Because if there was one thing Mr. Adams was sloppy about, it was money. He loved to wine and dine. He loved to charge the company for luxury. He thought no one would notice. But I had noticed. So, while he was busy barking at us about fixing the client relationships, I quietly prepared a little package. Copies of suspicious receipts. Emails where he bragged about padding expense reports. Screenshots of dinner bills with no clients present. I didn't send it directly, of course. That would be too obvious. Instead, I slipped it into the anonymous submission box the audit team had set up. No name, no trail. Just cold, hard evidence. Days later, I watched as two men in suits walked into Mr. Adams' office. The glass walls made it impossible to hide. Everyone saw it. He tried to look confident at first. But as the conversation went on, his face turned pale. He gestured wildly, defensive, sweating. The men took notes, asked more questions, and finally left him sitting there, deflated. Whispers spread like wildfire. Something was wrong. And I couldn't help but smile. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. See, getting him in trouble with the audit was just phase one. My real plan was to take everything he valued, his reputation, his power, and his job. To do that, I needed to show the higher-ups that there was a better option. Me. So, when the next big project came around, I stepped up. Normally, I stayed in the shadows. But this time, I volunteered to lead the presentation, carefully making it look like I was just helping out. Behind the scenes, I worked with Jenna and the others who had suffered under him. Together, we built the strongest campaign pitch our team had ever produced. And when the big day arrived, Mr. Adams tried to interrupt, tried to take control. But something magical happened. The clients shut him down. We'd like to hear more from Rachel, actually. I nearly cried on the spot. For the first time, my voice was heard. The clients loved the pitch. They shook my hand, praised my ideas, and asked to see more of my work. And right there, in front of everyone, Mr. Adams' grip on power slipped even further. Afterward, he cornered me in the hallway. His smile was cold, his voice dripping with venom. Careful, Rachel. Don't get too comfortable. You wouldn't last a week without me protecting you. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Funny. I was just thinking the same thing about you." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face. And I knew the end was near. After the audit scare and the client pitch where I outshined him, Mr. Adams wasn't the same. He was paranoid, jumpy. He stopped trusting anyone, even his so-called allies. But paranoia makes people sloppy. And sloppy was exactly what I needed. He started calling late-night meetings, forcing us to stay until midnight just to prove his authority. He sent emails full of half-baked ideas, demanding we execute them immediately. He made mistake after mistake, and I was there, quietly cataloging every one. But I wanted more than just evidence. I wanted the perfect setup. So, I waited. And then it came, in the form of a massive client merger deal. This was the kind of project that could secure the agency's reputation for years. The CEO himself was watching closely. Success meant promotions. Failure meant disaster. Naturally, Mr. Adams insisted on being the face of the project. But he was stretched thin, exhausted, and clearly in over his head. So, I offered a little help. "Why don't I draft the initial proposal for you?" I suggested sweetly. "You'll have plenty of time to polish it before presenting." His ego took the bait. He smirked and said, "Fine. Do the grunt work. I'll make it shine." But here's what he didn't know. I created 2 versions again. The first was flawless, strategic, creative, airtight. The kind of proposal that would make the clients fall in love with our agency. The second was sloppy, rushed, filled with errors. I left the perfect version on my personal drive. The other? That's the one I casually placed in his inbox. And just to make sure things played out the way I wanted, I sent an anonymous tip to the CEO's assistant the day before the presentation. "If you want to see who's really doing the work in your marketing team, pay attention to Rachel Morgan." The next morning, we all gathered in the boardroom. The clients, the CEO, the executives, everyone important was there. Mr. Adams strutted to the front like he owned the place. He clicked to the first slide of the bad deck. And just like before, chaos unfolded. The graphs were inaccurate. The numbers didn't add up. The strategy was incoherent. The clients shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. The CEO's face turned dark. Finally, one of the executives interrupted. "Mr. Adams, did you even prepare for this meeting?" He stammered, flustered. "Of course I did. This is cutting-edge strategy." And that's when the CEO turned to me. "Rachel, you've been on this project, correct? Do you have anything to add?" My heart was pounding, but I was ready. I plugged in my laptop, opened the real deck, the flawless one, and began to present. The room transformed. Confusion turned to interest. Interest turned to excitement. By the time I finished, the clients were nodding enthusiastically, praising the clarity and creativity. The CEO leaned back, folded his arms, and said, "Excellent work, Rachel. This is exactly what we needed." I glanced at Mr. Adams. His face was red, his jaw tight. For once, he had no words. The meeting ended with the clients shaking my hand, not his. The executives congratulated me, not him. And when I walked out of that room, I knew the balance of power had shifted. For years, he had stolen my work. But this time, in front of everyone that mattered, the truth was undeniable. Rachel Morgan was the one who delivered. And Mr. Adams? He was exposed as a fraud. The trap was set. Now it was only a matter of time before it closed on him completely. After the merger presentation, things shifted dramatically in the office. Suddenly, people were coming to me for advice. Executives started inviting me into strategy meetings. Meetings Mr. Adams wasn't even included in. He noticed. And it drove him insane. He tried everything to claw back control. He spread rumors that I was just lucky, that I was riding his coattails. He micromanaged my projects, desperate to find mistakes. He even tried to pit me against Jenna and the others by feeding us conflicting instructions. But the harder he tried to break me, the more obvious it became to everyone else. He was crumbling. And I was rising. Still, I knew I couldn't leave it at that. If I walked away now, he'd slither out of trouble like he always had. I needed to finish this, to destroy his reputation so thoroughly that he could never hurt anyone again. So, I turned to my allies. One evening, after work, I met Jenna and 2 others at a coffee shop. We sat in a corner booth, lowering our voices as I spread my laptop open. Inside was my folder. Months' worth of evidence. The stolen ideas. The abusive emails. The falsified expense reports. The failed presentations. The lies. I looked at them and said, "It's time." They nodded. They were just as ready as I was. Together, we organized everything into a clean, professional report. No emotions. No speculation. Just facts, dates, proof. We even included testimonials, carefully worded accounts of how he had mistreated and manipulated us. By the time we were finished, it looked less like a complaint and more like a full-blown case study in corporate fraud and harassment. The next morning, I walked into the office early. My hands were shaking as I printed a hard copy and sealed it in an envelope addressed to the CEO. Then, I emailed the digital version to HR and the audit team. And just like that, the match was lit. It didn't take long. By noon, whispers spread that Mr. Adams had been summoned to the top floor. We all watched as he strutted toward the elevator, clearly unaware of what was waiting for him. An hour passed. Then 2. When he finally returned, his face was ashen. His tie was loose, his hands trembling. He went straight into his office and slammed the door. The next day, HR sent out an email. Effective immediately, Mr. Adams is no longer with the company. The office erupted. People cheered quietly at their desks, texting each other with exclamation points. For the first time in years, the atmosphere felt light, hopeful. As for me, I sat back in my chair, closed my eyes, and took the deepest breath of my life. It was over. The man who had stolen my work, crushed my spirit, and underestimated me at every turn was finally gone. And I was still standing. No. I was stronger than ever. The day after the email went out, the office felt like a completely different place. The tension that had hung over us for years was gone. People smiled more. Conversations flowed freely. It was as if a heavy shadow had finally lifted. And me. I wasn't just another employee anymore. Executives stopped by my desk to personally thank me for stepping up. The CEO called me into his office, looked me in the eye, and said, "Rachel, you've shown incredible resilience and leadership. We need more people like you here." I walked out of that meeting with a promotion, a raise, and more importantly, respect. But as sweet as that victory was, it wasn't just about me. It was about every person who had been silenced, overlooked, or mistreated by people like Mr. Adams. It was about proving that even when you're underestimated, you can rise. You can fight back. You can win. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights, a glass of wine in my hand, and thought back to the girl who had cried in the bathroom at work, doubting herself. I wished I could reach back in time and whisper to her, "Hold on. You're stronger than you think." And one day, the tables will turn. Revenge didn't erase the years of stress and pain. But it did something just as powerful. It gave me back my voice. Mr. Adams probably thought he was untouchable. But in the end, his downfall came not from a dramatic scandal or a public explosion. It came from the people he underestimated, the ones he thought were powerless. And that's the irony of people like him. They never see it coming. So if you're listening to my story right now, maybe dealing with your own toxic boss or someone who keeps putting you down, remember this: patience is power. Knowledge is power. And your moment will come. I'm Rachel Morgan. And this was my revenge. If you enjoyed my story and want to hear more tales of revenge, betrayal, and justice, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.